Imagine waking up not to birdsong or sunrise, but to agony. You lie on a lump of straw and mud bricks, your spine stiff as iron. It's midday before you even open your eyes yet. Already, you're drenched in sweat. Welcome to ancient Greece. Not the romanticized land of marble gods or philosophical salons, but the sun-baked crucible of raw, unfiltered survival. Your eyes jerk open to a blinding glare, as though the sun itself is a cruel god flexing its power. The walls around you mud bricks baked for months in relentless heat emit a radiance so intense it sears your bones. You're trapped inside what feels like a slow cooker. It's 5 a.m., but the air is already molten. There's no fan, no cooling breeze, no escape, just heat with nowhere to hide. You slowly push yourself into a half-sitting posture. You tremble not from sleep, but from the realization that the day has already begun. Your muscles protest. You feel every strain from the previous day rolling back, reminding you of chores that never end, of labor that never pauses. No bed, no real mattress, just straw. No pillow, maybe a cloak or your own arm. It's survival, not comfort. A low sound follows your breath, your neighbors stirring. A wooden shutter squeaks open, and a goat stumbles in, bending to eat dust off the floor. Another household's woman pulls up water jars with a creak, and distant donkey brays set the tone for a day of broken sleep and broken dreams. What do you do first? You emerge into a courtyard where the ground is hot enough to fry an egg. Every step is agony. Sand, stone, and goat droppings fill your path. No shoes. Tough. Your bare soles sizzle like cheap asphalt in July. You stumble to the public fountain if you're lucky. If not, it's off to the well, miles away, balancing clay pots as though your life depends on it because it does. Still, on the way, you catch your own reflection in the dark water, eyes red from exhaustion, face smudged with dust and olive oil, a smear of earth across your cheek like a battle wound. You lift your jug, but the water's murky. It's the only taste you'll have until evening, if you don't first dilute it with wine at dawn. The irony is brutal but necessary. Drink diluted wine or risk death by contaminated water. Back home, you splash your face cold relief for 2 seconds before it turns into an oily aftertaste. No soap, no grooming kit. You smear olive oil from your small pouch if you scraped one together last week. Next comes the scrape-off, with a metal tool called a strigil. It's not a spa ritual, it's garbage removal. By the end, your skin squeaks but it's still coated in grit and sweat. You can smell like a garden until you step outside. Inside the single-room house, nothing is private. Round you, sleeping parents, younger siblings, even the family goat. Walls double as shock absorbers and heat conductors. One side cools your bones in winter, the other roasts you in summer. Shared corners darken by day, but at night become moist traps. This is life unfiltered and unrelenting. You shift closer to the goat's pen, partly for companionship, partly to escape the furnace wah. You cradle your clay pot of water like it's gold. You remember comforts you never had. Morning warmth from heat-blasted blankets, coffee brewing, running water, soft mattresses. Here, even the dream of comfort is a fantasy. You step outside again. The street is alive already. Tradesmen leading donkeys, children opening shops from mud brick stalls, elders calling out gossip mixed with curses and prayers. The smell of fig paste mixes with animal dung and roasting barley. Your muscles have not warmed up, but your senses are firing all at once. Hunger hits, but you push it down. There's no time to eat cake or fruit. There's only time to survive. In the shadow of a fig tree, you catch your breath. Your stomach growls. The sun climbs. You breathe deeply, tasting dust and hope. You are nothing special, no philosopher, no marble sculptor, no priest. You're a person who wakes before dawn and lives at the mercy of sand, stone, and sun, just to see another sunset. Yet in this shared struggle, sweat, breath, and survival, you touch the pulse of humanity. Raw, stubborn, alive. This is only the beginning. If you're intrigued. If this raw morning has already shaken something inside you, you'll want to stay. Because secrets from lives like this can shake not just your morning routine, but your entire sense of comfort. If you're enjoying this deep dive into forgotten mornings, please hit subscribe. Your support powers more journeys like this, digging truth from history's dust. Quick quiz. Would you rather wake up like this every day? A. Absolutely not. Keep my bed. A, C, and coffee. B. Surprisingly, I think I might survive. Bring it on. Comment A or B below and tell me why you might just spark the best conversation of the day. By the time you reach for food, if you're lucky enough to have any, the sun has already begun to climb like a punishment in the sky. Hunger comes not as a sharp pang, but as a dull, nagging presence, an ache you've learned to carry like a familiar weight. Breakfast in ancient Rhodes isn't an event. It's a compromise, a negotiation between what you crave and what still remains. You crouch in the corner of your single-room dwelling. There is no table, no kitchen, no aroma of sizzling fat or sweet bread. Just a clay bowl of hardened maize, the coarse barley flatbread baked days ago and now stiff with time and ash. You tap it with your fingernail. It clicks like bone. This is not food for pleasure. It is food for endurance. You dip the brittle wedge into a thin clay cup filled with diluted wine. The wine is not for celebration, but sanitation. Water alone can't be trusted. Not here. Not in this century. The wine kills what the well might have given, and gives back only enough taste to mask the mildew. You tear off a piece and chew slowly. It doesn't yield easily. Your jaw aches with effort. There's no butter, no oil, no soft fruit. If you had an olive, you already ate it yesterday. If there was cheese, it spoiled before the last moon. And if you had Honeywell, that means you're someone else entirely. Someone richer. Someone with goats and servants and choices. A voice calls from outside. A merchant yelling about salted fish. You don't rise. That luxury is beyond your reach this morning. Your cousin trades for him sometimes when they have coin, when they've sold enough cloth. Today, you're just hoping this maza lasts until nightfall. Your sister enters the room. Her eyes flicker to the food and then quickly away. You break the last third of your portion and hand it to her without speaking. This is what eating is now. A gesture of love that says, I have less, so you can have more. She accepts it without a smile, not because she's ungrateful, but because you've both learned that smiling wastes strength. Outside, the sun scorches the stones and amplifies the smells of the alley. Onions left too long, fish bones rotting in heat, the faint sweetness of fermenting grapes. These are the sense of survival, not celebration. This isn't the Athens of feasts or symposiums. This is Rhodes on an average morning, unforgiving, plain, and real. You remember once, when a trader came from Crete with a basket of dates. You had never seen dates. He gave you one, maybe out of pity. The skin was soft, almost golden. You bit into it, and it felt like biting into warmth itself. You didn't eat the seed for days. You carried it in your palm, thinking it might grow. It didn't. Back in the room, your mother washes a cracked plate. She says nothing. She hasn't spoken since last harvest, when the rains didn't come. That silence has become part of the air, part of the meal. You chew it, same as the bread. There is no breakfast conversation, no ritual of planning the day over coffee. Plans change. Food doesn't. You eat in silence, because silence takes less energy. You watch each other. You make mental notes: who's thinner than last week, who's coughing more than usual, whose eyes have begun to lose their fight. Still, you eat. Not because you're hungry, not because it tastes good, but because not eating is unthinkable. Because you promised your sister you'd keep going. Because somewhere, deep inside the dryness of that bread, is the proof that you are still alive. And so you chew slowly, without expression until the last bit is gone. You wipe the wine from your lips with the back of your hand. You look out the door, into a world that doesn't care if you're full or starving. And you stand. It's not enough. It never is. But it's something. And in ancient Greece, something is everything. The morning air outside is thick with dust and heat, yet there's a sharpness to it, like the breath before a storm. You return from the well with sore shoulders and raw hands. And the moment you step back into your dim home, you remember the next ritual of the day. Not one of prayer or reflection, but one of modesty, getting dressed. There is no wardrobe, no mirror, no decision fatigue. What you wear isn't about expression, it's about necessity, and even that feels generous. You lift a folded chiton from a wooden peg near the door. It's the same one you wore yesterday, and the day before that, and most days in between. Made from coarse linen that was once dyed a pale red, it has since faded into the color of forgotten things. You shake it gently to free the dust. The corners flop awkwardly, more rag than robe now. It is not tailored, nor stitched with care. It is simply cloth, and cloth is expensive. You feel every thread fray under your fingers as you lay it across your shoulders. Then begin the delicate process of folding and pinning it across your chest. The brooch at your shoulder is cracked, a thin bronze pin that used to belong to your father before it was bent in a market scuffle. You have to fasten it just so, not too tight or it'll snap, not too loose or the chiton will sag, exposing too much, too easily. There is no safety pin, no backup. If it fails, you are left exposed in more ways than one. You adjust your belt really, just a fraying rope looped around your waist twice. It helps pull the extra cloth into a kind of shape. It creates folds that almost resemble fashion if you squint. But this isn't about appearance. It's about containment. It's about making sure the wind doesn't steal your dignity on the walk to the agora. Outside, the sun gleams like molten silver across rooftops. The wind picks up slightly. You test your movement. A quick bend, a short stride. You're trying to see if the folds will hold. The last time they didn't, a group of boys near the fountain laughed as your tunic flew upward like a flag. You can still feel the shame prickling behind your ears. There are sandals by the door, handmade, mismatched. One strap is almost worn through. You consider skipping them. Your feet are calloused. After all, but the street stones are sharp, and the heat from them could split the skin. You tie them on with a slow deliberateness that feels like prayer. You watch your sister Thaleia, across the room, performing the same motions in silence. Her fingers fumble with a pin she bent back into shape just last week. Her himatayan is too big for her shoulders, slipping every few steps. She has no belt, no sandals. Her hair is tied back with a strip of cloth that was once the sleeve of your uncle's tunic. You nod at her, not in greeting, but in solidarity. In a world where appearance has less to do with who you are, and more to do with what you're missing, you recognize her struggle as your own. There is a quiet humiliation in this kind of dressing, the kind that wears you down. It isn't about looking poor, it's about knowing there's no other option. You're not choosing to look this way. You are this way. And yet, somehow, you gather yourself and walk into the light, shoulders straight, chin level, because the world still watches. And even in a chiton barely holding together, you still want to be seen as whole. You pass a merchant's son in the street. His tunic is clean, embroidered faintly with his family's crest. His sandals fit. He looks at you, just briefly, and looks away. You keep walking, not out of pride, but out of necessity. Pausing would break you, and you don't have time for that. What you wear may be nothing more than layered linen and a half-frosted brooch, but the act of wearing it is defiance. It is discipline. It is identity in a place that doesn't offer much of one. And as you step into the heat, the wind tugs at your hem. You press your hand to your hip, holding everything in place, not just the cloth, but your composure. This is how you prepare for a day in ancient Greece. You don't dress to impress, you dress to endure. The sun is higher now, blistering the whitewashed stones of the agora, casting harsh shadows beneath colonnades and drying sweat into salt before it can run. You move cautiously into the gathering space, not a market this time, but a political one. Today is an assembly day, and while you haven't spoken aloud in one before, you've come to listen. Maybe, just maybe, you'll vote. You don't expect comfort. The stone seating burns through your linen. The air smells of dust, oil, and men who've walked too far without washing. But the real weight in this space isn't the heat. It's the unspoken awareness that not everyone is here and not everyone is allowed. You look around and count faces, dozens, maybe hundreds. All men, all born of citizen parents, all above a certain age. No slaves, no women, not even the foreign. Traders who fund half the city's trade. The system calls itself democration, the rule of the people, but it's clear which people they mean. You wonder, as always, whether your presence is a privilege or a performance. A speaker climbs onto the platform. His voice is strong, practiced, made to slice through heat and wind. He proposes a new tax, argues that the city's walls need strengthening. Someone else counters, citing the expense, the strain on farmers, the risk of revolt. These aren't rehearsed speeches, they're live, unpredictable. You feel the tension rise and break like waves against stone. You clutch a small shard of broken pottery in your hand. It's smooth on one side, jagged on the other. You ran your thumb across it on the way here, imagining what name you might etch if called upon to vote in ostracism. One name, one decision. And that man, whoever receives the most votes, will be exiled for 10 years. No trial, no appeal, just silence and dust. It's not about guilt, it's about danger, influence, visibility. Sometimes, people become too popular, too persuasive, and the city, in its fear of tyranny, demands their disappearance. You think of your neighbor's brother, ostracized last spring. He spoke too often, too well. He led too many debates, challenged too many elders. His family rarely speaks now. Their door stays shut. Their olive grove is watched but untended. This is what power looks like here. Fragile, sharp-edged, and disposable. You shift on the stone bench. Behind you, an older man leans forward and whispers that your silence makes you wise. In a democracy built on speech, sometimes not speaking is how you survive. Yet you ache to speak. You ache to ask the question, pulsing in your chest since you first stepped into this square. How can we call this freedom when so many are locked outside it? Thaleia will never sit here. Your mother will never vote. The man who taught you to read, a freed slave named Bion, will never set foot in this place without fear of arrest. And still, this system claims to be the future. Maybe it is. Maybe every revolution begins incomplete. You tighten your grip on the pottery shard. The vote will begin soon. Not the ostracism yet that comes later in the season, but a vote on whether a new road should be paved through the orchards. If approved, it will mean easier trade routes. It will also mean tearing down the almond trees your family planted 2 generations ago. The speaker calls for a show of hands. Your fingers tremble. This isn't a secret ballot. Everyone can see who stands, who sits, who raises their arm, and who does not. Democracy, here, is as much about courage as it is about choice. You lift your hand, slowly, deliberately. You feel the sun blister your wrist, feel eyes scan your face. But you hold your arm steady. Maybe this is what participation feels like, not joy, not pride, but weight. And maybe that's what makes it real. When the vote ends, the crowd disperses. You keep the pottery shard in your tunic pocket. You don't write a name today, but you will. Sooner or later, everyone does. You walk back through the cities, open roads, past the market, past the olive press, past the low walls of houses where the excluded live and labor. And you think not, for the first time, that perhaps the greatest illusion here isn't power, but inclusion. You breathe in the warm air, rich with smoke and ambition, and you wonder, is this democracy? Or is this the slow rehearsal of something better, still waiting to be born? Either way, you were here, and that, for now, must be enough. Thaleia has been awake long before the first voice echoed in the streets. She doesn't wake with the sun. She wakes with the silence that comes just before it, the moment the world holds its breath, not yet stirred by men's footsteps or the bleating of restless animals. In that fragile pause, her day begins. She moves quietly, not because she must, but because life has taught her that noise rarely serves women well. Her bare feet slip across the cold floor, careful not to disturb the others. She crosses the room lit only by the flicker of a dying oil lamp and begins to knead the dough she mixed the night before. It is the same motion her mother once made, and her grandmother before, that a motion carved not from recipe, but from memory, from necessity. The house is one room. She has no door of her own, no corner untouched by others. Her life unfolds in shared space, shaped by the demands of men who step into public arenas, while she remains here in the private, the invisible, the essential. She doesn't speak much in the mornings, not from resentment, but from a rhythm of silence she's come to understand. Words take space, and space is a luxury. Instead, she lets her body do the talking. She grinds grain until her arms burn. She mends tunics with stitches so even they could be mistaken for a merchant's work. She braids her sister's hair with fingers that have no time to tremble. This is not weakness. This is precision. This is resilience etched into daily survival. Outside, the streets pulse with noise and debatemen shouting over matters they believe shape the world. Thaleia shapes a different world, one of care, of constancy, of unnoticed strength. Her power is not given. It is built from silence and held together by threads that never snap. She remembers, once, sneaking to the edge of the agora, just before dusk. She had watched from behind a stone wall, as her brother stood among men, eyes bright, voice loud. She couldn't hear the words, but she memorized the shape of his confidence. She didn't envy it, she mourned how far it felt from reach. Sometimes, when she's alone, she whispers questions to the clay walls of the home. Not prayers, not dreams, questions. What would it feel like to read aloud in public, to argue for a law, to be seen, not as a daughter or a wife-in-waiting, but as a mind with something worth listening to? Her answers never come, but the asking that she's learned is its own kind of freedom. She knows of the women in Sparta. Tales drift in, through travelers and servants. Stories of girls who run, fight, shout, own land. She wonders if those stories are true, or if they're just myths designed to soften the sting of what's denied here. She wonders if freedom in one city means anything to a woman trapped in another. Still, Thaleia resists not with rebellion, but with consistency, with showing up every day when no one thanks her, with holding together the fragile thread of the household, so her brother can raise his voice and her father can rest, and the young ones can sleep knowing their world is intact. In the evening, after the sun has bruised the sky and the fires are low, she sits alone on the rooftop, tunic clutched around her shoulders. She looks out at the stars, the same constellations men chart for navigation and omens. She charts them differently, not for direction, but for proof that there is something above this roof, beyond this life, that holds her too. Thaleia may never speak in the agora. Her name may never be etched in stone, but her hands have shaped every piece of that stone's foundation. Her silence is not erasure, it is strategy. It is resistance through care, strength through invisibility, and in the world she carries quiet, relentless. Unseen, there is a kind of legacy deeper than the names shouted in marble halls. There is the legacy of women who held the world together, not by leading it, but by never letting it fall apart. Nikandros was not born with a sword in his hand. He was born with clay under his nails, and the smell of olive oil pressed into his skin, the son of a potter in Rhodes. His earliest memories are not of drills or shields, but of sitting beside a kill, watching his father speak to fire like it was a living thing. But war does not ask what you were born to be. It simply arrives and waits for no one's answer. He was 15 when his name was called. His voice had not yet deepened. His arms, though wiry from carrying jugs of water and clay, were not made for war. Yet he was handed a wooden spear, told to run until his legs gave out, and to stand again. When they did, choice did not enter the conversation. The polis needed defenders. Every able body was a weapon, waiting to be shaped. Training was not noble. It was brutal. The heat of the sun peeled back illusions faster than skin. Nikandros learned to move in formation, to carry a shield heavier than his body wished to bear, to listen for the rhythm of marching feet rather than his own breath. He learned to ignore the ache of muscle and the sting of dust in his eyes. Discipline wasn't taught, it was beaten into them by repetition and the unrelenting demands of survival. There were no uniforms. Each soldier brought what he could. His armor was a patchwork of borrowed bronze and cracked leather. His helmet had once belonged to a neighbor's cousin, now dead in a skirmish along the coast. His sandals had no soles thick enough to protect him from the rocks of the training yard. Every step bled. But it wasn't the pain that hardened him. It was the quiet knowledge that he was never alone in it. Around him were boys, just like him, sons of fishermen, farmers, and merchants, none of whom had chosen this path. Together, they bled, broke, and rose. Not for glory, not for pride, but because walking away meant shame their families could never outlive. The first time Nikandros saw a man die, it wasn't in battle. It was during training. A boy, too thin, too tired, collapsed from heat. No one called for a physician. There was no ceremony. The instructors dragged his body from the path and told the rest to keep marching. That night, Nikandros didn't sleep. He stared at the sky and asked the stars if they remembered the boy's name, because no one else would. Years passed, and battle came not in the dramatic storm of epics, but in the sudden, savage clash of flesh and bronze. Nikandros stood in the phalanx, shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield. The air was filled not with courage, but with fear. His heart beat so hard he could hear it in his ears over the clash of blades. He killed, though he cannot recall how. He felt the jolt in his wrist, the slick grip of a bloodied shaft, the way a man's eyes lose their light. What he remembers more vividly is the silence after, the emptiness of a field scattered with the fallen, the way the wind seemed embarrassed to move across it. When he returned, the city celebrated. Wine flowed. Songs were sung. Mothers wept with relief. But he stood at the edge of it all, feeling like a ghost. His armor was cracked, his tunic stained, his spirit frayed. He smiled when spoken to, laughed when prompted, but inside, he carried every moment like a weight stitched into his ribs. Now, when he walks through the narrow lanes of Rhodes, he carries his spear like an extension of his shadow. Children watch him with awe. Old men nod with recognition. Women offer bread or water with shy gratitude, but none of them see what he sees. None of them carry the sound of screaming that lingers in dreams, or the memory of sand soaked in something warmer than sea spray. He often returns to his father's workshop, though his father passed during the last fever season. The kill is cold. The tools are rusted. But sometimes, late at night, Nikandros kneels beside the ashes and shapes a small bowl from the remaining clay. His hands remember. The rhythm is different than that of war, but it is still a kind of fighting, a kind of healing. Nikandros never asked to be a soldier. but he wears the title like a scar unseen, but undeniable. Not out of pride, but out of reverence. For those who didn't return, for the boy he was, for the silence between battles, and every time he lifts that bowl to the sun and sees the imperfections baked into it, he knows that survival, like pottery, is not about perfection. It's about enduring fire and emerging with shape. Perilaos does not speak when he prays. He whispers, and even then, not always in words. Most mornings, he offers only breath, carried up with the scent of olive oil and crushed herbs, rising in invisible curls toward the unforgiving sky. It is not about eloquence. The gods do not require poetry. They require respect and fear. Faith in Rhodes is not gentle. It is not warm or tender or wrapped in certainty. It is edged in anxiety, steeped in ritual, and built on a foundation of contradiction. Perilaos knows this because he lives it. He believes not because he always wants to, but because he cannot afford not to. The gods are everywhere, not metaphorically, literally, in statues, in trees, in sea foam, and in sickness. In the thunder over the bay, and the sudden silence before an earthquake. There is no such thing as coincidence. Everything is watched. Everything is judged. Everything is weighed. This morning Perilaos kneels in the dirt outside his home. In his hands is a small offering, dried figs, a smear of goat cheese, a clay cup of mixed wine. His wife does not join him. She watches from the doorway, arms folded, eyes tired. Their daughter is sick again. The fever hasn't broken in days. The house smells like sweat and despair. They've already tried everything. Poultices, chants, prayers to Asclepius. Now, it is down to the god's mood. He lifts the plate and sets it gently on the family's makeshift altar, a slab of limestone that once bordered a road, now repurposed for hope. He doesn't expect a miracle. He only hopes for mercy or silence. In his youth, faith was simpler. It was festivals and music, garlands of laurel, dancing under torches. He remembers the Dionysia days, when wine flowed freely, and people cried during plays, as if the actors could exorcise their own grief. Back then, the gods felt like stories, beautiful ones, necessary ones. But now, in the gray of adulthood, faith has sharpened. The gods are no longer characters. They are forces. Some compassionate, some cold, all unpredictable. Zeus, the thunderer, could be generous with one hand and brutal with the other. Athena, his daughter, could bestow wisdom and withhold warmth in the same breath. Even Apollo, the healer, had moods darker than winter seas. Perilaos doesn't worship out of love. He worships out of understanding, out of awe, out of a fear so ancient it has roots in his blood. To forget the gods is to tempt chaos. To defy them is to invite it. Even those who say they doubt still pour wine at harvest, still cross themselves at lightning, still glance upward when a child coughs too long. He has seen men mock Hermes and lose their livelihood within days. He's seen a woman deny Artemis a tribute and miscarry twice before, disappearing. Are those coincidences or warnings? He doesn't ask anymore. Later that afternoon, the city prepares for a minor ritual to Poseidon. It's been a dry season. The sea has turned against the fishermen, sending back fewer and fewer catches. The priest calls for offerings. Perilaos walks past the temple, head bowed. He gives a coin. He mutters a blessing. He doesn't wait to see if it helps. The temples are grand, carved from marble and echoing with chants. But Perilaos knows the gods don't live in temples. They live in the spaces between certainty, in illness, in hunger, in that moment of breath before something breaks. His daughter sleeps now, her breath shallow but even. His wife hasn't left her side. Perilaos stands in the doorway and watches the sun dip low. He thinks of Hades not as a villain, but as the quiet collector of endings. He thinks of Persephone and the cycles that refuse to be broken. He closes his eyes. He doesn't ask for healing. He asks to be allowed to keep hoping. Faith, for him, is not belief in a happy ending. It's belief in continuation, in holding on, in honoring forces that don't always honor back. And so, he prays again, quietly, with trembling hands and a full heart. Not because he's sure the gods are listening, but because, in a world as fragile as this, he can't risk the chance that they are. In the quiet hush before dawn, the amphitheater of Delphi stands empty but expectant, as Nikandros, Thaleia, Perilaos, and your own imagined steps lead into its embrace. You sense something elemental in the stone seats and blank stage, a portal to a world where raw human emotion was not only witnessed, but celebrated. When the first actors step forward, masks painted with sorrow, fear, or rage, it is not performance, it is exorcism. They do not whisper tragedy, they embody it. The mother who has lost her son, her grief carved into every word, every posture. In that moment, tragedy becomes collective, a wound shared, acknowledged beneath the open sky. You weep not out of pity, but out of recognition. The fragility of life, the cruelty of chance, these are not tragedies of fiction, but realities that breathe around you each day. Comedy arrives next, and it bites. Sharp, unrelenting satire that mocks politicians, gods, even the height of human folly. It's not polite laughter, it's a battle cry. The citymen you walk beside in the agora when you vote, they are no different. On stage, naked, buffeted by words that cut deeper than swords. You'll laugh not because it is safe, but because it is catharsis. In humor, you challenge power. In humor, you survive. This is the gift of Greek drama, emotional compass that directs you inward, a mirror that refuses flattery, and it's no accident. That drama was woven into festivals like Dionysia, where wine, spectacle, and divine worship met in cacophony and revelation. You left the theater not just entertained, but unsettled, able to feel discomfort and beauty at once. In the sculptor's workshop, chiseled marble forms take shape under the artisan's hand. Athena's shoulders curved just so, Zeus's beard falling in idealized waves of stone. The statues are not gods, they are invitations, objects only, within reach, because the artist dared to shape them. You walk among them and think, this is what ambition looks like. A willingness to create something colossal from cold, unknowing rock. Philosophy emerges in this openness to question, to doubt, in the shade of olive trees lining the academy. Sitting cross-legged on sun-warmed earth, Socrates asked questions without purpose other than to unsettle comfort. What is justice? He demanded, and the people he met stumbled under their own certainty. By challenging those around him, he demanded better answers, not for glory, but for clarity. He drank hemlock rather than recant, not a martyr for fame, but a philosopher haunted by conviction. Plato wrote, Aristotle catalogued. Their works became lanterns, passed through centuries carving clarity from the darkness of ignorance. Ideas like democracy, ethics, astronomy, these were not incidental. They were forged in community, in debate, in trust that thought itself was sacred. Then there are the sounds. Lyres strummed at dusk, voices rising in ode to Apollo. The rhythmic pounding of drums in Demeter's festivals, alive with earth's renewal. The chorus lament rising and falling in hypnotic cadence. The Greeks gave us more than instruments. They gave us the notion that sound could reach beyond sound, that words arranged in careful meter could alter consciousness, that art mattered not just for beauty, but for meaning. In the agora, merchants hawk olives and fish, but philosophers hawk ideas, and the difference is subtle. Athenian democracy may have excluded Thaleia and free people like Bion, but it cultivated a taste for participation, for reasoning, for the idea that even ordinary men could shape policy. The seed of modern governance lies here not in perfection, but in aspiration. Our characters witness this. Perilaos, having offered prayers, now observes the crowd debate. He senses that the gods gifted them reason. Thaleia, over flour and embers, senses that the same reason she isn't permitted to wield might one day reshape her world. Nikandros, holding clay in his scarred hands, sees that craft and thought can heal wounds that bullets cannot. The Dutch painter Rembrandt once said that he could repair his broken soul in the presence of a great painting. The Greeks didn't just paint, they built possibilities. They dared to ask what freedom means, what truth is, what beauty demands. They wrote laws and laid stones. They stood naked in the gymnasium and argued nakedly, not with violence, but with vulnerability. This is their real gift. Permission. Permission to question, to suffer, to feel, to create, to share, to fail, to stand again. It is not marble that endures, it is that spark within us that refuses defeat, that feels the ache of loss and choice and possibility, that hears tragedy in two voices and comedy in one laugh, and understands that both are human. The fires that burned in their theaters, their temples, their workshops, they pierced the darkness. They did not just illuminate, they invited us to stand in light. And look, you walk out of Delphi as the sunset bleeds over the mountains. You carry its gift lightly in your bones. You may not hold a marble statue or philosophize in public, but you still carry the impulse to create meaning, to question, to transform everyday dust into something meaningful. That is the fire they lit. That is the art they gave. That is the voice they left behind for every one of us brave enough to use it. You wouldn't last a day. That isn't a judgment, it's a truth. The heat alone would undo you. The noise, the weight of silence, the smell of oil-soaked bread, the aching tension in every muscle from sleeping on bare ground. The water, when it came, would taste wrong. The wine, too thin. The bread hard enough to break a tooth. The clothing would scratch your skin. The labor would break your back. But still here they were. Here they stood. Thaleia never once raised her voice in the agora, yet every dawn, she woke and stitched a life from threadbare cloth, from ash, from absence. She endured invisibility, not because it was noble, but because she had no other option. And in her quiet care, she held the roof of her world together. Nikandros never wanted war, but he wore its scars like second skin. When he carved bowls beside the cold kill, he carved from memory. He carried the weight of those who didn't return and shaped their names into every curve. He survived, not by becoming less human, but by refusing to forget. Perilaos never knew if the gods truly listened, but he offered figs. He whispered hope. He dared to ask questions the world didn't answer. When his daughter's fever broke, he didn't thank fate. He thanked the ritual, the consistency of showing up with trembling hands and offering what little he had. They lived lives of breath, of grit, of unrecorded victories. No one carved their faces into marble. No theater echoed their stories. But they shaped history in quieter ways, in choices, in sacrifices, in persistence. And you sitting now, scrolling, comfortable, might wonder what any of this has to do with you. Everything. Because the echoes they left shape the world you live in, the systems you vote within, the words you speak, the art you feel, the moral compass that guides you when no one is looking. You wouldn't last a day, not because you're weak, but because you were never made to live in a world that demanded this much from so little. But they did, and in doing so, they gave you the chance to live differently. They didn't last just because they were strong. They lasted because they adapted, because they sang even when their throats were raw, because they loved even as the city burned, because they believed, somehow, that survival alone wasn't enough, that stories mattered, that memory mattered. Thaleia's thread, Nikandros' clay, Perilaos' whisper. These are not myths, they are truths, carried in silence. And now it's your turn. Not to replicate their lives, but to honor them. To remember that what endures is never marble or empire's resilience, and the courage to look back and carry something forward. So if this story touched you, if something in their dust lives now in your breath, don't let it stop here. Carry them with you. And the next time you stand under the sun, or hold a bowl, or watch a child sleep, remember, someone like you once did the same, without comfort, without certainty, but with all the hope in the world. And that more than war, more than words is why they lasted. When we first met Thaleia, Nikandros, and Perilaos, you might have thought they belonged only to ancient stone, their lives distant sketches, carved in history's margins. But as their world unfolded chapter by chapter, you began to perceive something more profound. Each of them was a living mirror, reflecting a part of ourselves we often overlook, in dust-swept kitchens, training yards, prayer altars. They experienced endurance, not because they were mythical heroes, but because they were human just like us. Thaleia, waking before dawn, didn't hold a sword or stand in the agora. She held thread, hope, and the unspoken weight of her household's survival. Every morning she fed her family, wore the same tunic, knelt at her loom, and wove more than cloth. She wove resilience. Hers was a form of quiet courage, the daily choice to persist when there was no promise of recognition. She stayed silent because she lacked ideas, but because her world gave her no space to speak. And still, in every stitch and every chore, she held her world together. Nikandros, the reluctant soldier, came from fields and kilns, not battlefields. He didn't choose war, but war chose him. He learned formation beneath an unrelenting sun, arms burning under borrowed bronze, every drop of sweat carving lines of sorrow into his young face. He absorbed the triumph and terror of battle, the breakable calm afterward, and returned home haunted. He mourned at night, carried silence into crowded rooms, and healed not in some grand temple, but in the kill's warm hearth, shaping clay with the same hands that carried the spear. His life teaches us that suffering doesn't define us, transforms us. Perilaos believed, not blindly, but out of choice. He knew the gods might ignore, or punish, or grant nothing at all, but still he prayed, still he offered figs, and wine, and whispers. His faith was not magical, it was steadfast, a ritual of hope in places where outcomes are uncertain. In a cracked world, his act was simple. He showed up. Hope for him was not a guaranteed, was a discipline carried through each quiet breath. Their lives intersect against the ordinary backdrop of ancient Rhodes, a place not so different from the places we live except for the dust, the gods, the sandals, the scarcity. But in their ordinary days, there was extraordinary intention, a purpose quietly acknowledged. Endure, create, care, ask. And in that, we recognize a humanity still standing in us. Underscore why their stories still matter. 1. Everyday sacrifice is the bedrock of every society. Thaleia's contributions are rarely chronicled, but they matter. She ensures the bakery fires burn, that the children are clean, that the household survives not through grand deeds, but through perpetual tending. In our lives, our small, consistent acts, bringing coffee to the study, refinancing a mortgage, being present with a friend, carry more weight than we realize. Our everyday labor is the silent scaffolding of meaning. 2. Unchosen burdens shape character. Nikandros never sought war. Like so many of us, hardship found him uninvited. And yet, what he makes of that suffering, his attempts to heal through creation, to shape clay into something that endures, is a powerful metaphor. We may not survive with medals, but we survive with scars that remind us we did, and can still, fashion beauty from pain. 3. Faith is chosen in defiance of doubt. Perilaos doesn't expect miracles. He hopes. That difference is crucial. Whether his faith is religious, spiritual, or simply disciplined optimism, it reminds us that choice matters. in hardship. Choosing to hope is not naive, it is purposeful. It is choosing to stand, even if the winds break you. 4. Legacy is quieter than we think. We glorify public triumphs, but legacy is often quieter, woven in care, healed in silence, whispered in consistency. The seeds we plant aren't always monumental. Their roots grow unseen. One kind gesture, a consistent morning routine, a whispered prayer under breath, these ripple outward. 5. Stories shape empathy. When you share your energy, your time, your tears through story, you transform loneliness into belonging. Thaleia's silence opens a new way to see motherhood. Nikandros' sweat opens a way to see trauma. Perilaos' faith opens a way to see courage in uncertainty. In their stories, our stories find resonance. Applying these lessons today, practice quiet consistency. Like Thaleia, build something small every day. Whether it's tidying your workspace, watering a plant, calling a friend, or finishing a page in your journal, each act builds coherence. You don't need to announce it, you only need to do it. Transform trauma through creation. If your ship has crashed, do not abandon it. Repair it. Like Nikandros living in remnants. Find that outlet that helps you lay your pain into something new. Writing, painting, gardening, volunteering, teaching. Healing isn't forgetting, it's transformation. Hold hope as practice. You don't need a temple to cultivate hope. Try ritual, a few deep breaths before sleep, a weekly reflection of gratitude, a daily mindfulness moment, even a simple candle by your desk. The act of returning to hope matters even when outcomes stay unclear. Remember, influence doesn't require visibility. The world doesn't move on flashy speeches alone. It moves on daily proof: cooking dinner, helping a neighbor, solving a problem, showing empathy. Your life is more powerful than applause. Build inclusive communities. Ancient democracy was imperfect. We inherit its aspiration. Use it. Invite voices from the margins. Support each other's stories. Learn from difference. Change grows on radical listening. A question for you: which of our 3 characters felt most like your mirror today, and why? Thaleia's quiet strength, Nikandros' hard-earned resilience, Perilaos' chosen hope. Share your favorite moment or line that resonated, and feel free to reflect how you carry their echo forward in your life. I'd love to read your experiences, and so would others in our community. If this journey through their dust and determination moved you, please subscribe. Every new voice that joins this space helps me keep finding stories untold, resonances unheard, and hope worth carrying. Your subscription is a gift not just to me, but to everyone who finds these stories in the days ahead. Thank you for walking alongside Thaleia, Nikandros, and Perilaos tonight. May their whispered threads become part of your own.